familiar smell of explosives that every Marine learns to recognize. The blast echoed over the island, blending with screams and non-stop gunfire. Through my binoculars, I saw the Japanese positions we were ordered to attack once the shelling stopped. They were dug deep into the coral, with hidden bunkers and small firing holes we'd have to destroy one by one using grenades and flamethrowers. They had turned every hole and cave into a deadly trap. The only way to break through was to get dangerously close and throw explosives inside. Then my radio crackled. It was Lieutenant Peterson from the command post, 200 yards behind us. He said, "Kowalski, this is Foxhole 6. The shelling stops in 2 minutes. Move on my signal. Your target is that machine gun nest at grid 237 to 451. Take it and wait for new orders." I clicked the radio twice to let him know I heard him, then turned to my men and went through the same routine every leader knows too well. We checked our weapons and gear one last time before heading into danger. Corporal Danny O'Brien had the Browning automatic rifle, the big gun we used to keep the enemy's heads down while we moved. He was from Boston, short-tempered, and one of the best natural fighters I'd ever seen. Next to him, PFC Rodriguez carried the flamethrower. That thing weighed 60 pounds and made him a top target for enemy snipers, but it could clear a bunker. In seconds, I yelled over the blasts. Remember the plan. Move quickly and stay low. Use the craters for cover. Don't clump together. The Japanese will throw everything they've got at us. If you stop moving, a sniper will get you. It was the same speech I'd given at Guadalcanal, Bougainville, and Saipan. It never got easier to say, and the young faces listening never seemed to change. The ship fire started moving further inland. The huge shells now hit deeper into enemy territory. That was our cue. In 1 minute, we'd be up and running toward enemies who had spent months getting ready to kill us. I held my Thompson submachine gun tightly. My grenades hung from my belt. Somewhere ahead, Colonel Ogata's men were checking their weapons, ready to die for their emperor. It was going to be a long, bloody day. When the last shell hit, silence fell, broken only by the sound of my breathing and the waves crashing on Tinian's rocky shore. A wounded Marine was crying out for a medic, his voice mixing with strange bird calls from the jungle. The Navy had called this a tropical paradise. Now, it was held built by skilled hands and we were about to walk straight into it. "Let's go, Marines," I shouted, jumping out of the crater and moving toward the enemy. My gun ready, my squad followed. In practiced moves we had learned through hard fights, the coral ground was rough, full of holes and scattered debris. We moved fast, trying to cross open ground before the enemy saw us. The first enemy fire came from a hidden spot 30 yards to our right. It was the harsh sound of a Japanese Type 96 machine gun that could fire 550 rounds a minute. Bullets zipped past my head like angry bees, and I dove into a crater as glowing tracers lit the sky like deadly sparks. "Machine gun on the right," I shouted into the radio. Somebody hit that spot. A Japanese mortar exploded about 50 yards to our left, spraying us with coral chunks and that familiar smell of explosives that every Marine learns to recognize. The blast echoed over the island, blending with screams and non-stop gunfire. Through my binoculars, I saw the Japanese positions we were ordered to attack once the shelling stopped. They were dug deep into the coral, with hidden bunkers and small firing holes we'd have to destroy one by one, using grenades and flamethrowers. They had turned every hole and cave into a deadly trap. The only way to break through was to get dangerously close and throw explosives inside. Then my radio crackled. It was Lieutenant Peterson from the command post, 200 yards behind us. He said, "Kowalski, this is Foxhole 6. The shelling stops in 2 minutes. Move on my signal. Your target is that machine gun nest at grid 237 to 451. Take it and wait for new orders." I clicked the radio twice to let him know I heard him, then turned to my men and went through the same routine every leader knows too well. We checked our weapons and gear one last time before heading into danger. Corporal Danny O'Brien had the Browning automatic rifle, the big gun we used to keep the enemy's heads down while we moved. He was from Boston, short-tempered, and one of the best natural fighters I'd ever seen. Next to him, PFC Rodriguez carried the flamethrower. That thing weighed 60 pounds and made him a top target for enemy snipers, but it could clear a bunker. In seconds, I yelled over the blasts. "Remember the plan. Move quickly and stay low. Use the craters for cover. Don't clump together. The Japanese will throw everything they've got at us. If you stop moving, a sniper will get you." It was the same speech I'd given at Guadalcanal, Bougainville, and Saipan. It never got easier to say, and the young faces listening never seemed to change. The ship fire started moving further inland. The huge shells now hit deeper into enemy territory. That was our cue. In 1 minute, we'd be up and running toward enemies who had spent months getting ready to kill us. I held my Thompson submachine gun tightly. My grenades hung from my belt. Somewhere ahead, Colonel Ogata's men were checking their weapons, ready to die for their emperor. It was going to be a long, bloody day. When the last shell hit, silence fell, broken only by the sound of my breathing and the waves crashing on Tinian's rocky shore. A wounded Marine was crying out for a medic, his voice mixing with strange bird calls from the jungle. The Navy had called this a tropical paradise. Now, it was hell-built by skilled hands and we were about to walk straight into it. "Let's go, Marines," I shouted, jumping out of the crater and moving toward the enemy. My gun ready, my squad followed. In practiced moves we had learned through hard fights, the coral ground was rough, full of holes and scattered debris. We moved fast, trying to cross open ground before the enemy saw us. The first enemy fire came from a hidden spot 30 yards to our right. It was the harsh sound of a Japanese Type 96 machine gun that could fire 550 rounds a minute. Bullets zipped past my head like angry bees, and I dove into a crater as glowing tracers lit the sky like deadly sparks. "Machine gun on the right," I shouted into the radio. "Somebody hit that." Spot O'Brien was already on it. He dashed from cover to cover with his Browning, looking for a clear shot. That gun was our strongest weapon, able to lay down thick fire and keep the enemy down. But to do that, he had to risk his life and get into a better position. Martinez was next to me, flat on the coral, frozen in fear. He had come straight from boot camp at Paris Island, full of confidence. Now he was learning what real battle meant, knowing someone was actually aiming to end your life. "Stay low and keep moving." I pulled him by the shoulder toward a coral ridge that gave us better cover. If we stay put, they'll find our range and drop mortars on us. We had to keep going. A bullet slammed into the coral inches from my head, sending sharp bits flying. Rodriguez was circling left with his flamethrower, trying to get close enough to use it. His weapon could shoot flames about 40 yards, but that meant he had to get very close to the enemy's bunkers. These places could survive battleship shells but not fire. Sometimes, the only way to win was to burn the enemy out. The enemy gunfire turned toward O'Brien. I saw my chance. "Move up," I yelled, and we rushed forward in short bursts, using every bit of cover we could. The enemy bunker was nearly invisible, built into the coral and hidden so well we only saw it when the gun fired. But they had made one mistake. They'd built it too close to a patch of plants. Rodriguez could use that to hide. I watched the young guy from East LA move carefully through the bushes. His gear was heavy, but he didn't stop. He was 19, and had never been farther from home than basic training. Now, he was here, about to face enemies who never surrendered. Rodriguez fired his flamethrower. Flames shot into the bunker like a dragon's breath. The horrible screams from inside still echo in my dreams. But we didn't have time to think about it. The Japanese inside had been trying to kill us. Rodriguez just did his job better. "Bunkers clear," he shouted, but his voice shook. Taking lives was part of our job, but burning people alive was something that left deep scars. I'd seen the toughest men fall apart after using a flamethrower, not out of fear, but because they had caused pain no one should ever feel, even the enemy. We gathered near the destroyed bunker and looked at our situation. This was just one part of a bigger defense system filled with tunnels and other bunkers stretching far along the ridge. We'd have to fight through every one. It would take time and lives, but there was no other way. "Kowalski, this is Foxhole 6. Lieutenant Peterson's voice came through the radio. "Nice job on that bunker. Move forward to phase line Bravo and set up a lookout. Be ready. We're hearing reports of a Japanese counterattack heading your way." I confirmed the message and looked around. Out of the 12 men I started with, only 7 were left. The coral ridge ahead looked like the surface of the moon, full of holes and war debris. Somewhere in that rocky jungle, the Japanese were setting their next trap. Their commander had turned Tinian into a stronghold. But we were Marines, and we turned strongholds into graves. It was still early in the day. We had more battles to fight before this island was ours. The counterattack hit us like something out of a nightmare. Dozens of Japanese soldiers charged through the coral maze, yelling "Banzai" with their bayonets ready. They came with the wild bravery of men who knew they were going to die. I hit the ground behind a chunk of coral, firing my Thompson as fast as I could. The bullets tore into the crowd of enemies coming from caves and cracks in the rocks. Rodriguez was on my left with his flamethrower, but there were too many of them, and they came too fast for one man to stop. A Japanese soldier suddenly appeared above our crater, already aiming his rifle at Martinez. I quickly fired 3 shots into his chest, spinning him around and dropping him onto the coral with a heavy smack. Martinez, the kid from back home, was firing his rifle as fast as he could, but his hands were shaking so much that most of his bullets missed. I yelled at him over the noise, trying to keep him focused. "Aim carefully, Martinez, don't waste bullets. These guys aren't backing off." A Japanese grenade landed 10 feet away and went off with a loud crack, sending sharp coral pieces flying, like razor blades. My ears were ringing, but I could still hear O'Brien's automatic rifle pounding away at the enemy soldiers, who kept charging despite how many we were taking down. The Japanese were doing one of their all-out rush attacks again, what they used to win against the Chinese early in the war. But this kind of attack was hopeless against Marines who had learned how to fight in the jungles of the Solomon Islands. Still, the enemy kept coming. Their belief in dying for their emperor was so strong that giving up wasn't even an option. I saw one Japanese officer leading his men right at O'Brien, his sword flashing in the sun as he shouted them forward into our gunfire. O'Brien waited until they were close about 30 yards, then opened fire, cutting them down like grass. But more soldiers stepped over their fallen comrades without stopping. "They're nuts," Martinez shouted, his voice shaky and tired. "Why won't they surrender?" I didn't have time to explain their beliefs or culture to a scared teenager from Iowa. I was too busy keeping us alive. A rifle shot flew past my head, so close I felt the air move. I saw where the shot came from and fired my whole magazine into that coral spot. Then the attack peaked. A Japanese officer appeared on the ridge above us, holding up his sword as he led another charge straight at us. Rodriguez was ready. He turned the slope into a wall of fire with his flamethrower, burning everything in his way. The screams that followed were horrible men dying in unbearable pain. But this kind of fight had no room for pity. It was just about staying alive. When the shooting finally ended, Japanese bodies lay all around, over 40 of them dead from trying to push us off that ridge. Some were so young they probably hadn't even started shaving. Young men sent here to die for a cause they likely didn't fully understand, but they fought with a kind of mad bravery that made them terrifying enemies. I asked my squad to check in. One by one, they responded, voices tired and full of pain. O'Brien had shrapnel in his arm but still held onto his weapon. Rodriguez wasn't injured but was clearly shaken after using the flamethrower. Martinez had a bleeding cut on his forehead, but he could keep fighting. We had made it through that attack, but we were clearly hurting. Other squads were also reporting injuries and losses. I grabbed my radio. Foxhole 6. This is Kowalski. We fought them off, but we have wounded. We need more ammo and medics now. Lieutenant Peterson responded through the static, saying help was on the way. But we all knew that help could take a while and another attack might come before it arrived. The ridge we were told to take stretched ahead, full of shell craters and bits of broken gear. Any hole or shadow could hide more enemy troops. Colonel Ogata had turned Tinian into a huge stronghold, and we were slowly tearing it down bunker by bunker. But each fight was costing both sides. I looked at my watch. We'd only been fighting for under 3 hours, though it felt like days. The sun was rising higher, and the heat was making our helmets too hot to touch. More Marines were landing behind us to join the battle, but the enemy wasn't going to let them through Isili. This island was meant to be a fortress. We were turning it into a graveyard. The Japanese had turned every natural cave in the coral into a deadly trap. Clearing them out was like trying to perform surgery with explosives and fire. I crouched near the entrance of one such cave, watching Rodriguez get his flamethrower ready for another go. These caves were built perfectly for defense, with multiple entry points and hidden shooting holes. They were nearly impossible to destroy with regular weapons. "They've been working hard," O'Brien said while looking through his binoculars. The Japanese had spent months building these defenses with the help of engineers and forced labor. They connected the caves with tunnels so they could move around without being seen, making each one a mini fortress. Martinez was learning that engineering in war was more about killing than construction. He had volunteered to carry a bag of explosives into one of the smaller caves. When he came back, he looked pale and shaken. He'd dropped 20 pounds of TNT into a tunnel packed with enemy soldiers. The blast had taken down part of the ridge, but the screams before the explosion would stay in his head forever. "You did good, kid," I told him, even though my words felt empty. "If you hadn't done that, a lot of Marines would have died. That's our job, to make sure our guys go home and theirs don't." It wasn't comforting, but it was all I could say to a 19-year-old who had just learned what war really means. The cave in front of us was different, bigger, stronger, and more dangerous. It had firing holes that covered the entire approach. Intel said it might be a command post, maybe even Colonel Ogata's base. But intelligence was often wrong, and the only way to be sure was to go in, and that usually meant people getting killed. Rodriguez stepped forward with his flamethrower, the heavy tanks on his back making him look like an armored warrior from the past. His weapon was powerful, but only worked up close, real close. The moment the Japanese saw him, they'd do everything they could to stop him. His job was part combat, part suicide mission. "Cover me when I move," he said. His voice was calm, even though his eyes showed fear. He'd become our go-to man for clearing caves, not because he liked it, but because he was good at it and had stayed alive doing it. That skill might save his life, but it wouldn't let him sleep peacefully after the war. O'Brien began firing long bursts. The bullets hit the coral and kicked up dust that we hoped would hide Rodriguez's approach. I added my own gunfire, shooting at any dark spot that might hide an enemy. The sound of our weapons echoed loudly, but we could still hear enemy rifles firing back. Rodriguez ran forward in quick dashes, using whatever cover he could find. A bullet knocked his helmet off halfway there, but he didn't stop. He knew that stopping meant death. When he reached the cave, He didn't pause. He pulled the trigger. Flames shot into the tunnel, burning deep into the cave where Japanese soldiers thought they were safe. The screams were terrible and unhuman, sounds that would stay with us forever. Then came the pops of exploding bullets and stored weapons, catching fire. The cave, once a stronghold, became their grave. "Cave's clear," Rodriguez said, his voice shaking from the shock. Inside, dozens of enemy soldiers had died in the fire, killed by a weapon that didn't care who you were. It was effective, but it left deep emotional wounds for the ones who used it, even if they had no choice. We gathered around the burned entrance and checked where we stood. That was the last major enemy base in this part of the ridge. But there were still many more scattered across the island. Each one would cost us time, bullets, and lives. But it was the only way forward. By the fourth day of fighting, Tinian looked like something from a nightmare. Burnt trees, smoking holes, and destruction everywhere. I stood where there used to be palm trees, now only charred stumps, and tried to make sense of what we'd done since landing here. The numbers were shocking. Over 8,000 Japanese soldiers were dead bodies scattered across ridges and valleys, showing just how fiercely they had fought. My squad was down to just 4 men still able to fight. The rest were either dead or badly wounded. Martinez was still hanging on, now hardened by what he'd seen. Rodriguez had been hit by flying metal but refused to leave, saying his weapon was too important. O'Brien was held together by coffee and pure willpower, his arm in a sling, but still firing his rifle. The Japanese were finally starting to wear down, but they made sure we paid for every step forward. These weren't fresh troops like we'd faced before. These were hardened veterans from earlier wars. They knew exactly what they were doing and had no fear of death. Intel says about 500 are left, Lieutenant Peterson told us at the command post. He looked worn out from days of non-stop battle, but they're dug in tight and they won't give up easily. We need to take the whole island by tomorrow night, so we're going to have to push through every cave and bunker between here and the northern shore. The last Japanese positions were near what used to be Tinian's main airfield. Now a mess of bomb craters and broken metal that would take months to repair, but this island was key. From here, American B-29 bombers could finally reach the Japanese homeland and hit it hard. Something we hadn't done since Pearl Harbor. Colonel Ogata had chosen his last stand wisely. He knew he was going to die, but he was determined to make every moment of resistance count. The Japanese had built their defenses in a way that each strongpoint could support the others, and their guns covered overlapping areas, making a straightened attack nearly impossible without heavy losses. But the Marines had gained hard experience through fierce battles in the Pacific, and we came up with ways to turn what made the Japanese defenses strong into weaknesses. The battle started with the biggest naval bombardment of the entire operation. Huge ships like battleships and cruisers launched thousands of shells at the enemy, shaking the whole island with their power. The hard coral rock of Tinian not only made it ideal for defense but also made the explosions even more deadly, sending shockwaves that could kill soldiers far from the blast. Still, when the firing stopped and we moved forward, the Japanese were not gone. They were still there, fighting with everything they had, choosing to die instead of give up. Hidden machine guns fired on us. Mortars started landing in our lines. Japanese soldiers with rifles shot at us from such close range that we could see their faces clearly. Rodriguez reached the main Japanese defense first. It was a group of bunkers all linked together, overlooking the path to the airfield. He used his flamethrower one last time, sending fire into the tunnels where Colonel Ogata's troops had made their last stand. The terrible sounds that followed were becoming common. It had become normal in a campaign where we were winning one burning bunker at a time. When the battle finally ended, the sudden quiet felt strange, more shocking than the noise of gunfire. After 4 days of non-stop fighting, the silence made it feel like we had entered a new world. We had crushed the last Japanese resistance on Tinian, but we paid a high price in American lives. The final numbers were heavy. More than 9,000 Japanese were dead, including Colonel Ogata and most of his officers. American losses were fewer, but still painful. Over 400 Marines and soldiers, either killed or injured. The island, meant to be a stronghold, had turned into a graveyard. But now it was ours, and it would be used to push the war closer to Japan itself. I stood in the wreckage of what used to be Colonel Ogata's command center and tried to understand what we had done. His body was still at his desk, holding a pistol, with a bullet wound in his head. He had ended his life as a soldier who fought bravely, but couldn't match America's greater production power and better strategies. He died the same way he lived, with complete loyalty to his emperor. Tinian was now under our control, but, as I looked at my remaining men, the victory felt empty. We had started the battle with 12 Marines. Only 4 of us were left unharmed. The rest had been killed or wounded in a battle that would likely be overlooked in the history books, overshadowed by bigger and more famous battles. But for those of us who were there, we would never forget each tunnel we cleared, every bunker we took, and every Japanese soldier who died trying to stop us. That fortress had become a cemetery, just like I once said it would. but the price we paid would stay with me in nightmares for the rest of my life. War was said to be about victories and defeats, but down at the level of small units like ours, it was about staying alive, about losing friends, and about watching good men die, for goals that would soon no longer matter. We had won, but that victory felt a lot like loss when we counted how many lives were gone. 3 months before money. I thought I had already seen the worst of the Pacific War when we landed on Engebi Island, but nothing could have prepared me for the organized killing that made those coral islands a symbol of Japanese determination and American strength. I was Staff Sergeant Mike Kowalski from the 2nd Battalion, 22nd Marines, standing knee-deep in the lagoon at 6:30 in the morning on February 19, 1944. Watching our ships turn Anami Island into a smoking, shattered mess that looked like the moon after a meteor strike. The Japanese defending Engebi were not like the ones we'd faced before. These were top soldiers from Major General Nishida's 1st Amphibious Brigade, well-trained troops who had been strengthening their defenses for months and knew exactly how to make Marines suffer heavy losses. The atoll had 3 main islands, joined by coral reefs. Each island was a separate stronghold that we would have to take by attacking across open water with no place to hide from enemy fire. This won't be like Majuro, Lieutenant Peterson told us before the attack, reminding us of a place we'd taken without a single shot. Reports say there are about 2,500 Japanese on Engebi, and they've dug in deep. Every cave, every rock, every bunker has been turned into a place to fight from. We'll have to fight hard for every bit of land. The boat carrying my squad toward Anami Island was one of many moving across the lagoon, protected by the heaviest naval shelling I had ever seen. Battleships Tennessee and Pennsylvania were firing their huge 16-inch guns with precision, making huge blasts that we could feel even through the metal floor of our boat. Still, we could see enemy gun flashes in areas that had survived the bombardment. Corporal Danny O'Brien was checking his weapon again, his serious expression showing that he knew how tough this fight would be. These coral islands are different from the volcanic ones, he told the new guys who joined us after Tarawa. The Japs can dig deeper here, build stronger shelters, and there's no jungle to hide us. It's all open space and deadly ground. Private Rodriguez was quiet. While getting his flamethrower ready, the kid from East LA had learned at Tarawa how his weapon could save lives and also bring death at close range. The M222 flamethrower could wipe out a bunker fast, but using it meant getting dangerously close enough to see the gold in the enemy's teeth. We were heading for Green Beach, a small strip of sand about 50 yards wide, backed by a concrete wall that the Japanese had turned into a firing position. Their machine guns were already shooting at us, bullets bouncing off the water like sparks. The driver of our landing craft was skillfully steering through coral heads, but we all knew we'd have to run across that beach with bullets flying at us the whole way. 30 seconds, the driver shouted over the noise of the engines and explosions. I could see Anami Island ahead, its palm trees destroyed by the bombing, but the Japanese defenses still alive and active. Gunfire flashed from hidden positions, and the sound of Japanese machine guns added to the chaos that was about to swallow us. The ramp dropped, and we rushed into waist-deep water, immediately under fire from enemy bunkers the bombing hadn't destroyed. The coral floor under us was full of holes and sharp edges, making it easy to fall even before the bullets hit. I saw Private Kalchek get shot in the chest, disappearing beneath the water without a splash. Move, 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 I shouted, urging my squad to reach the wall for any cover we could find. A Japanese mortar exploded behind us, sending water and bits of coral flying, bouncing off our helmets like stones. They had our range, and more shells were coming fast. O'Brien reached the wall first, already firing his weapon at the enemy trying to turn the beach into a death zone. The concrete wall was only 4 feet high, but gave some protection from the constant bullets. Rodriguez followed, dragging his heavy flamethrower through the water with focus, knowing how important it would be once we got into the bunkers. The Japanese had taken lessons from past battles, and their defenses on Anami were built to perfection.